Welcome to Vulnerability, Introspection and Growth, the podcast where we explore the beautiful, messy and transformative magic that happens when we dare to go within. I'm your host, Robyn Harris, and in each episode we'll dive into real, honest stories from people who've faced their fears, embraced their vulnerabilities and discovered unexpected growth in their personal lives, careers, or businesses. This is a space for deep listening, open hearts, and soul-nourishing conversations. Because when we meet ourselves in our rawest moments, that's often where our greatest wisdom starts. Let's begin. Hello and welcome to another episode of Vulnerability, Introspection and Growth. And today I have with me Mike Leaman. And Mike was a teacher who then went on to being a deputy head teacher, but has now transitioned to being a career coach, helping educators transition into fulfilling new roles beyond the classroom. And I believe, Mike, you have founded Classroom Exit Coach. So that's blending strategic insight with empathy and compassion. I love that. To guide teachers through a whole series of different skills, CV writing, career exploration, and interview prep. And in the work that you now do, you draw on your own leadership and experiences, offering practical, tailored support. And that's whether clients are moving from the classroom into corporate or charity or creative or freelance sectors. So a wide range that you support. So I'd like to start with the three questions. First of all, what makes your story relatable for others?
Well, first of all, thank you. A massive thank you to Robyn for having me on. It's really a pleasure to talk with you. I guess what makes the story relatable is I think many of us have been at a point in our lives where we recognise that change is needed and we recognise that what we're currently doing is unsustainable. But the biggest barrier is often confidence and knowing where to start. So I think that is kind of the support that I help people the most with.
That's massive, isn't it? That first step when it all feels so huge. And who do you feel will gain the most from listening to this conversation today?
I think anyone who feels stuck in their career, who feels like their career has held them back and is kind of taking more than it gives, and anyone who feels that a change of career will bring not only a different job but also a complete lifestyle transformation as well. I think that's the people that I help the most.
Wonderful. And what do you hope that people will take away from listening to this conversation?
I think knowing that it's totally possible to change career without retraining is a really important thing just to hear, and that there are so many transferable skills now in so many lines of work, and the job market is not what it once was. Gone are those, or going are those kind of one word kind of job titles, jobs for life sort of things. They still exist, but there are now so many different avenues to go down, and it's easier than ever to perhaps get your foot in the door and to transition, and you know, and that all starts with confidence to know what those things are.
Absolutely. And I love that idea of sharing hope. Even just if somebody has stumbled across this conversation and is thinking, well, why would I listen to this instantly? You've shared something that is going to open up people's horizons and options. But in as much as you are comfortable, would you please share with us the vulnerability, introspection and growth that you have been through along your journey and that have brought you to where you are now?
Where to start really with that? Yeah, so I worked in education for most of my career. For many years, I gave it 110%. It was my identity, as a lot of people have with their jobs, I think, especially if you've trained to do a specific thing, it becomes a core part of who you are. It's often when you're at a party or something, someone says to you, "What do you do?" And that becomes a key thing. You talk about your job rather than who you are. And I think teaching is one of those things that brings instant kind of a flurry of emotions and memories and kind of, oh, I know what that is, and it's got societal value and etc. etc. So did that for many years. It started, as I think with many sectors of public life now, that jobs are harder than ever. They are we're being asked to do more with less every year, cuts and kind of pressures and societal changes. And teaching, as many people will know, because there are so many teachers in the UK, so many people are connected with teachers, so many people, parents of teachers, brothers, whatever, sisters, siblings, family members, friends. You know how hard it is. You hear how hard it is. And for me, it started to take a massive toll on my life. And I spent years trying to make the change that I wanted to see in education. So I spent years in educational leadership. I did various sort of assistant head level jobs, which are kind of running a sixth form, teaching and learning, working with staff development. I was a deputy head teacher of a large performing, high performing secondary school, and I did that for several years and really tried to sort of change the system from the inside. But the system has so many systemic issues with funding and overworking and being undervalued, and that all leads to recruitment and retention problems and all sorts of things. So that really took its toll on me over a number of years. I felt like I was working harder and harder and harder. And I'm not saying that other people don't work hard. It's just for me in that role, on average, I was probably working 65 to 70 hours a week. I used to get up at 5 a.m. and I would drive to work at 6. I'd be behind my desk in school at about 6:45, and then I'd stay there for about 12 hours. I'd drive home, have dinner, and then I'd work again until about midnight most evenings, and then yeah, get up and do the whole thing. So again and again and again that cycle, and I was kind of trapped in that cycle, and it started to really take its toll. Career change was something in the back of my mind for many years. But I was really kind of unsure what I could do and what that would look like. So I started to, as a side project, kind of investigate all of those different routes and start to have conversations with people in different sectors and really start to explore what my options were. And over a course of a couple of years doing that and really networking and talking with people, it became apparent that I really enjoyed sort of working with people and coaching and helping them with their careers. And that had been something that I'd been doing for many, many years, and championing people in their career progression and side steps and kind of whether that be in teaching or outside of teaching. So that felt like a natural step for me. But before I jumped into that world, teaching got to a point for me and school leadership got to a point for me that just completely pushed me to my limit. I ended up getting signed off by the doctor for work-related stress, burnout, and once I was out, I couldn't see myself going back in. So I knew that I'd been given this kind of lifeline of, you're out now, you've got breathing space. It took me months and months and months to sort of recover and to sort of re-regulate and sort of find myself again and find your identity again outside of teaching. And it took me a long time to tell people as well. I don't think I told immediate family. I told my wife, but I don't think I told many people for a good 3 or 4 months that I'd left. And it was a really hard thing to do, but I could feel myself at work becoming more and more disconnected with the part of the job that I once loved. And people often ask me now, do you miss it? And I say, I do miss parts of it, but I don't have any regrets with what I've done. I've left for the reasons that I left, and I'm not the only teacher who's done this journey. There are many, many, many else who have left. Yeah.
Sure, yes. And I love what you were saying about seeing the job as your identity. And I think that's something that a lot of people do. And like you say at parties, what is it that you do? And we become the what, not the who. And our sense of value and worth as a person is often as what we do and how productive we feel that we are, or we feel we're seen to be. And listening to your story then, it was amazing that you were also able to do that research and the networking. Did you do that at the same time as you were working those crazy long days? Because my perception of that is, where's the bandwidth? Where's the energy? Where's the belief that you can do something else? Because when you're that embedded in it all, swamped by it all, how can you see beyond it? So were you doing that research at the same time, or were you doing that research when you were later off work and re-evaluating and thinking about, if I don't go back, what do I do?
Yeah, it was a bit of both. I kind of had it on the one of the only sort of positives, like from my perspective of teaching, is that you do get some time off during the year, and you do get those regular breaks. Now, those of you listening who might not be teachers might think that that's a massive perk of the job and it's unfair and all those kind of things. But I would encourage you to sort of reframe those as almost like recovery periods and sort of time in lieu. So if you're working 70 hours a week non-stop, and the average work full-time job in the UK is 37.5, you're basically doing two jobs a week every single week. So those holidays are almost kind of owed time rather than, time that's sort of a perk of the job. So
not also preparation time, because you might have finished 1 year, but you've got another year coming, and particularly if you've worked your way up to head of department, head of, deputy head of the school, you've got lots of different prep work to do. You've got your class prep, you've got timetabling, you've got all of those other things that you need to do. So I do have teachers in my family, so I never saw it as time off. It was more time that was used in a different way. You obviously didn't have the students in the classroom, but you were still working on your job.
yeah,
Maybe not to the
100%.
same
Yeah,
intensity, though.
definitely, definitely. And I'm working with so many school leaders at the moment. About 80% of my clients are school leaders. About a third of them are head teachers. So this affects all levels of sort of education system. But yeah, you're right. At the moment, we're recording this in sort of mid-August, and there'll be many, many, many school leaders who are preparing for A-level results and the fallout of that, GCSE
Yes, of
results.
course.
And it's not just the bit that you see where it's envelopes and a few photos. There's hundreds of hours of work that goes on behind the scenes. Even just to give a snippet, all those certificates come in a big bundle. They've all got to be organized. They've all got to be put into envelopes. Then they've got to be, you've got to have permissions for certain things. Then it's, what are those kids doing? Where are they going? Are they joining the sixth form? Are they going on to university? There's so much work. So even in the nice 6 weeks where teachers don't do anything, they are doing a huge amount of work behind the scenes. It just might not be visible. But in terms of your original question, in terms of how to structure this, it took me a long time to sort of chip away at networking and talking to people. And that's where I sort of found that my business now is to kind of give people those shortcuts to help unlock those doors that I know exist. And you don't know what you don't know, especially for many people in education. They've gone from educating themselves through primary school, secondary school, university. And this is not a criticism, this is just the way the system works, is you end up just sitting on the other side of the desk. So now you've done 20 years educating yourself and 20 years educating other people. Why would you know what's beyond the walls?
The world will have changed. Even if you had some time in between, you didn't jump straight from your own education into educating others. If you've been working within the education system for 20 years, it's a lot to then be looking above the parapet and saying, well, what's out there now? Because if you think of the rate of change in that 20 years, it's incredible.
Yeah.
So, and I know that I expect, do some continuous professional development while you're working, but it's still not the same as coming out into the job market.
Yeah. It's the job market now is the pace of it is unbelievable. It's always been fast, but particularly in the last 5 years since COVID, really. I mean, and the advent of AI has meant the streamlining of so many jobs and the ability for job seekers to use AI to really help them in the career hunt as well, is massive. It helps you unlock so many new opportunities. And unlike when I was doing my kind of career change, it was all manual and sort of, really kind of doing it all by hand. Now, job seekers with some guidance and some sort of support can really kind of harness that and take massive shortcuts. Yeah.
Fantastic. So you mentioned that people obviously you're not the only one who has left the profession and made a change. You shared with me before we came online about the statistics. So that really rattled me, and it sent shivers down my spine, the numbers, because I knew that there are challenges, but I didn't realize it was anything like the level it is. So would you just tell those who are listening, who may not be aware of the statistics, what they are, because they're quite alarming?
Yeah, they are alarming. And so there's a lot of studies, a lot of research onto this topic, obviously, because the government, it's a big concern for them, but it's not spoken about very widely in the media, because it's not the most sort of interesting story, perhaps, you know. But about 40,000 teachers in England leave the profession every single year, and that's been the case pretty much since COVID. To put that into context in terms of the percentage of teachers, so 10% of all teachers left the profession last year in England. That's England alone. And that's for reasons other than retirement. And that's for just the state sector. So if we were to put in kind of all the other factors as well, like the independent sector at the moment, you know, without making this too political with the changes in VAT and all those kind of things, I'm not going to comment on all those things, but they have meant an awful lot of closures of schools and a lot of teachers leaving the profession, but they're not even counted in those statistics of 40,000. If we put that another way, that's 110 teachers every single day in England, every day of the year, quit the profession. So it's quite staggering because that kind of attrition rate, if you like, in terms of going through those numbers would be okay. But then there's also, you know, not okay, but it would be sustainable if there was a line of people willing to queue up to get into the profession. But what we have in teaching is a recruitment crisis and a retention crisis. So people are leaving faster than ever, and people are not joining the profession anywhere near like they once were 20 years ago or so, for all the different reasons we've spoken about.
Which is mind-boggling, and I would really love if any, those who are listening, that they take this to heart, and particularly if anybody is listening from the educational sector, to think this really highlights how much change is required. But also, I love what you were saying to me beforehand as well about, and the numbers illustrate this, that it's not the individuals. There is so much more going on here. And what would you say is the key message within the work that you do, this message that you're sharing today?
I think it's that change is totally possible, even though sometimes it can feel that it's just completely unachievable. You know, as a teacher, you might read these stories, or anyone stuck in their career, and you think, well, good for them, but I can't do that. And it's all about, prioritizing. And if you really, really want to make this work for you, then start small. Start with the small steps, which is talking to other people, thinking about what other careers are there? What do your friends do? What do your family do for work? What could you do? What are your requirements? What are your non-negotiables? In terms of salary and location, and what are your top skills and what still energizes you? Start with those small style questions before you, because I think if you just open the internet and go on Indeed.com or something like that and just scroll through job boards, you're going to end up in a worse position than you currently are, because you're going to feel overwhelmed. You're going to feel like you're not qualified for anything. You're not going to know what half the job titles mean. And it's the equivalent of a bit like doom scrolling, staying up till 2 a.m. just looking through videos. You'll get lost down a rabbit hole. If you take a big step back and look at the sort of more of the strategy behind your career hunt in terms of what are you looking for and what's your timeline and all those kind of things, it starts to become a bit more realistic. And the more you put yourself out there and you become more vulnerable, and you say to people, I'm considering a career change. I don't know what that looks like at the moment, but I'm really interested in learning more about your career. And the more people will talk to you and want to share, and you will start to get an idea of what you do and don't want. But it starts with that vulnerability and that introspection and that reflection.
That's really challenging, because if your job is your identity, you're already feeling vulnerable because you feel like you're putting your best into this job and it's not enough.
Yeah.
So what does that do to your sense of value and worth and ability and capability? And like you say, if you're doom scrolling through all of these different jobs and I can't do any of these, I don't have these skills, my last qualifications were X years ago, I've only ever been a teacher, what do I do? I think that's where somebody like you really comes in, because you've been through the experience and you've pivoted successfully and what you know the steps to take. Like you're just saying, make it small steps, keep them simple, keep them smart, so that they're specific, they're measurable, they're achievable, they're realistic, and you can set a time goal. And that ability to open up and say to people, I'm not sure what this is going to look like. I know that I need to make a change, but at this point in time, I don't know what that is, which is fine. I think it's really important as well to share with people that that is okay. It's okay to not know. And like you were saying, why would you know?
Yeah.
Because you haven't looked into this before. It's new to you. And also the message that it isn't the person. They're not the one that's broken, not working well. It's the system. The system is outdated and it hasn't kept up. I loved what you were saying before about that opportunity to pause and reflect. And to reassess, is this where I want to be? Is this what I want to be doing? Is it actually working for me?
Yeah.
Can I make it work?
I think that's really important. Everyone in education is working so hard,
Yes.
as many public sector services are. But that working at 90 miles an hour means that there is very little scope to stop and reflect and pause and genuinely think about the issues and sort of grapple with what could be done. Because it's always been that way, or tradition and all sorts of things, and then there are other people who don't want it to change because it's in their interest for it not to change. There's a lot of people making a lot of money out of issues in certain things, and therefore they have a bit of a bias in terms of, well, we don't really want this issue to go away because of X, Y, and Z. But we know the data and we know the research. Again, the government have done the research around why teachers are leaving. So in 2024, they released a report called The Working Lives of Teachers and Leaders, where they ranked the reasons that teachers gave for why they left the profession. 80% of teachers and senior leaders who left the profession said workload was a major factor. 74% said stress and well-being was a major factor. 70% said feeling undervalued was and there was a list of probably 50 things. Things that were on that list that were really low down were the things that the media always talk about. So pay was right at the bottom. Most teachers, that's not the issue. It's not about pay. It is about the working conditions, which are relentless and unsustainable. And that's what drives them to make change. It's not about the pay. Most teachers are quite happy to take a pay cut and get the hours back in their life.
And what would you say is the number one factor that keeps people in that profession, even though they know it's not working for them? They know, like you, just heading for burnout, it's not sustainable, but they don't feel they can make a shift. What would you say is the number one factor?
Yeah, it's difficult because I think there are two big ones. I think confidence is one, knowing, that knowing what you could do, because most people don't. We've talked about that already. So confidence being a big barrier. But I think there's also a huge amount of guilt around leaving teaching. And I think there are unhelpfully quite a lot of people, either in the education system or outside the education system, who create a bit of a stigma around people who decide to leave. You're using the language like you're quitting, but we're in it for the kids. I personally really don't. Lots of people like this term. I really don't like the term vocation. I think when you use the word vocation, it normalizes a really kind of potentially horrific working conditions and sort of says, well, it's a calling, it's a vocation, and therefore it should be really hard. My personal viewpoint on that is that it's possible to have a vocation that isn't pushing you to burnout. It's a political choice to underfund and sort of overload the education system. So I think guilt is a big one because people think, well, if I leave, who else would do this? Or I can't leave now because these kids are about to go into year 11 or whatever it happens to be. And therefore, it's suddenly, that kind of idea of like, well, one day I'll leave. And then before you know it, you're close to retirement and you think, well, what could have been?
Yeah, don't want to reach that point. That's soul destroying. So, just as we kind of draw this to a close, what number one tip would you share with people who are in that position where they're absolutely snowed under, they're reaching or have gone beyond overwhelm, but they can't, from where they are right now, they can't see a way out?
Well, I think the first thing I'd say is in relation to sort of normalizing, being signed off work to some extent. I'm not encouraging you to do that, but if you are at a point where you're completely at breaking point and you're burnt out and you cannot do this anymore, then speak to your GP and get that headspace, because it's in no one's interest. I've been on both sides of it. I've been the school leader where I've seen people and I've encouraged them to go speak to the doctor and kind of get that headspace for them. And I've been signed off myself, and I think lots needs to happen to normalize all of this and kind of talk about, of course you're going to be in that sort of headspace in those kind of working conditions. It's surprising that more people aren't. A lot of people masking and sort of, whatever. So that's one aspect. But I think the other part of that, which kind of links to it, is just start talking to people, whether they be people in alternative careers, whether they just be asking for advice, asking for guidance, putting yourself out there, saying to your friends, I'm thinking of career change, might be something on the horizon. And you'll be surprised. You might be thinking that they're going to judge you or sort of shame you, or kind of, you'd be surprised how many people are really encouraging, because they've seen what that job has done to you, and they want the best for you. And that can be really hard to put yourself out there. But I think if you're serious about career change, I think it starts with just having conversations. And that could be with someone like me, or it could be with your partner, or it could be with your GP, or whatever it happens to be. But I think putting yourself out there and talking to people about it, vocalizing that ambition, will be the first part of that journey.
And that in itself is a vulnerability, both asking for the GP to get their support and talking to people, because there is, as you say, that guilt and that stigma around leaving a vocation.
Yeah.
So I completely get what you're saying there. And I think we have this sense of that's too vulnerable, and we predict how it's going to turn out, don't we? We think, oh, they're going to shame me, etc. But then we go through it and we realize, no, like you say, you do get that support, because we can't actually see. And maybe that's a reflection of how we feel in ourselves, that guilt. It's not actually what people are going to say to us. It's our inner voice. And when we can get beyond that, we find there's a lot of support out there, whether that is from your partner, from somebody like yourself, or another career support. So that's been absolutely wonderful, Mike. Thank you so much for sharing everything that you've shared today. Lastly, how can people get hold of you? Because I'm sure there are going to be people listening to this who think that's just what I need, whether they're currently thinking of career progression, career shifting, or it's listening to this that has prompted that. So where can they find you? How can they get hold of you?
So the business name is Classroom Exit Coach. Our website is www.classroomexitcoach.co.uk. Probably the place where I'm active on Facebook and Instagram, but the main place is LinkedIn. So if you're on LinkedIn, please do reach out, please connect, and let's have a conversation. Yeah.
Fantastic. And I'll be putting Mike's details in the show notes below. So if this is speaking to you, do reach out and have a conversation with him. Thank you so much again, Mike. It's been a pleasure to have you here today.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure talking with you.
Bye-bye, and see you next time. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Vulnerability, Introspection and Growth. I hope it's given you a moment to breathe, reflect, and perhaps even see your own story with a little more compassion. If you find this conversation meaningful, I'd love it if you'd share, subscribe, or leave a review. It helps others find their way here too. Until next time, take gentle care, and remember, the journey inwards is where the real growth begins.